Okay, so it's a little after 1 p.m., so I'll start the webinar now. Thank you all for joining me today to discuss the results of the 2019 statewide needs assessment of Utah. This webinar is slightly different to my previous ones because I'm going to spend most of the time talking about the needs assessment and how you can use it to create, implement, and evaluate your program. But I'll also connect the results to common concepts in evaluation, especially program impact. So I'll leave some time for questions at the end, and for reference, this webinar will be recorded, and I'll make the PowerPoint available on my website. So getting started, I'd like to talk about the importance of a needs assessment. While we all know it's important to understand the needs of our target audience, we often overlook this stage in the program planning process. But conducting a needs assessment is usually the first step of program planning. I'll discuss how to use the results of the needs assessment to plan a program. It mainly relates to a discussion on resource allocation. Then I'll directly connect the needs assessment to program impact. If you remember, I spoke a lot about problems, the social, economic, and environmental conditions in my previous webinars. I said that an evaluation plan and a logic model always start with a description of what is and what should be. So the needs assessment basically gives us the answers to these questions. After I'm covering the background, I'll move on to the actual study by giving a brief overview of the methods, so you'll be able to easily follow the results. Then I'll get into the findings. The findings are split into three major parts. We'll talk about the societal and community issues that residents would like extension to focus on. Then I'll go over the urgent needs of different communities. And this would mainly be a discussion of community problems and issues, and it would answer the most basic question of what is and what should be. So I'll use figures to show the most important findings so you can easily follow along. If you had the chance to visit my website, you will notice that all the figures that I'll be showing today are already available there. After the methods and findings, I'll go over a simple framework to help you use the results of this needs assessment to plan your own program. This would give you a practical sense of using a needs assessment in program planning. So most of us already know why a needs assessment is important, but conducting one is often difficult because it takes time, resources, and effort to properly design and implement a needs assessment. But most of the literature on program planning and evaluation clearly states that the first step in any program is conducting a needs assessment. This ensures that we allocate resources to the most important problems and the issues affecting our target audience. So extension and funding across the US is mostly in decline. And now more than ever, we need to ensure that our resources are focused on those persistent issues affecting communities. So a needs assessment basically gives us the information that we need to understand these issues. In the same way, the needs assessment provides us with a solid justification for funding. If we can show funders that our programs are focused on meeting a recognized community need, then we're more likely to get funding. This means that the results of our needs assessments provide the rationale for our program. It gives us what we need to create relevant programs. And these relevant programs are targeted specifically to the most urgent needs. So the social, economic, and environmental needs are always changing. We know that community issues are complex and does not stay the same over time. A needs assessment ensures that we understand persistent, prevalent, and most importantly, the emerging needs of residents. This information will allow us to create new, innovative, and relevant programming. This is very important because extension should be at the forefront and a leader in changing societal needs. So following on from the importance of the needs assessment is its main use in program planning. In this regard, the needs assessment gives us the information to frame an impact statement during the program planning process. Now, this involves describing the current and desired conditions. This is the gap between what is and what should be. Our impact statement basically states how the program would close that gap or basically impact the need. For example, suppose a high priority need is rural employment. The needs assessment would establish this by measuring the difference between what is the current level of rural employment and what is the desired level of employment. The gap between these two conditions represent the need. So with this information, we can identify exactly how our program would increase employment opportunities for rural residents. So continuing on from this example, you'll notice that the needs assessment provides information on the current and the desired situation. And in turn, this allows us to establish desired outcomes. So let's assume our long-term goal is to increase rural employment. How exactly would we achieve this? So there are many alternatives. So we need to focus on our program on what's important and what's within the scope of extension. So medium-term outcomes can be getting rural residents to start small farms producing specialty crops, for example. Interestingly, this is already happening in Utah because there are premium markets for high value agricultural products. So in this regard, we would like our participants to establish small farms after participating in our program. How can we ensure our program motivates participants to start these small farms? The answer relates to mostly knowledge gain, skill development, and attitude change. These are our short-term outcomes. So as you can see, a description of the long-term outcome, which came directly from the needs assessment, allows us to set our desired program outcomes. This can be used to create our logic model, set benchmarks, and set assessments for program success and failure. Clearly, the needs assessment allows us to create that complete program plan and gives us a way to evaluate our program. This is why it is always the first step of program planning. But you don't need to conduct your own needs assessment because I'll provide you with a complete statewide report that you can use in your program. So let's move on to the actual report now. This was a descriptive study that focused on 4 major areas. These were residents' perceptions on how much effort USU Extension should place on critical issues. Another area, the high priority needs of urban and rural communities, and also the type of programs residents are most interested in. And finally, how can we better communicate with our target audience? So this needs assessment provided a comprehensive report on the current problems of residents and their willingness to engage with extension. So a Qualtrics survey was conducted and the data were collected from 1,043 residents. However, I still used a convenience sample. So my plan was to ensure that the results would be generalizable to the population of Utah. So I used something called a raking method to weigh the data. This basically means that the characteristics of the sample matched with the real demographic makeup of Utah. And the sample basically reflected the population based on age, gender, and county of residence. So the results can be generalizable to the population, but as always, it's best to exercise caution when making absolute statements. So given the broad goals of the needs assessment, I wanted to ensure it was possible to directly compare items within each section of the assessment. So I analyzed the data and presented something I refer to as a point score for each item. The point score allows us to rank items as such as community needs and critical issues, so that we can set priorities. In this report, while the actual breakdown of categories in the point score varies from section to section, the point score always have a range from 0 to 1, with higher values meaning higher priority. The point score is just an easy way to rank items in the needs assessment. So assessing needs itself can be a bit tricky, especially when you're doing survey research. So as I mentioned, the need is basically the difference between what is and what should be. How can we understand this by only looking at survey responses? The typical method is an assessment of what we call a normative need. A normative need is based on value judgment. So we ask participants to state their perception of what is important to them and how satisfied they are with the state of this issue. So think about this example. If community residents believe that access to emergency healthcare is very important, however, they are not satisfied with the current access to this service, then a need exists. Notice the need was determined based on one perceived importance of an asset and the perceived satisfaction towards the state of that asset. So in the survey, a typical question would ask, how important is this asset, community service or issue is to you? And then a follow-up question would ask, are you satisfied with the current state of this issue? Looking at the table here, if a resident is dissatisfied with an important community asset or service, then a need exists. The normative need is a comparison between satisfaction and importance. That's basically it. The gap between these two factors represents what is and what should be. Now, the next step is to actually measure this gap. In this study, I used a non-parametric test. I won't go into the details of that, but this provides an indication of the difference between importance and satisfaction. So as you may realize by now, there are many details involved in measuring needs. So at this point, I think it's best to just dive into the results. So I'd like to start off by talking about residents' perception of where USU Extension should place its efforts. The questionnaire included 35 different societal issues. The chart here shows the top 10 societal issues in urban, suburban, and rural communities. So you'd quickly notice that protecting air and water quality were highest ranked across all communities. In other words, residents in urban, suburban, and rural communities all believe that Extension should place very high effort on protecting air and water quality. So what type of programs come to mind that currently addresses either one of these issues? If you can't think of any, this presents a great opportunity for you to create very relevant programming. Also, it should be noted that programs such as landscape irrigation and environmental conservation can be connected to water and air quality issues. So moving on, other important issues were youth mental health and teen suicide prevention, food safety in the context of foodborne illnesses, and preserving natural ecosystems and habitats. You'll notice all respondents, regardless of location, thought that Extension should place a high level of effort on all the top 10 items here. This presents a tremendous opportunity for Extension. You can show the relevance of your program by connecting it to one or more of the societal issues listed in this chart. A good starting point is to think about how your program relates to one of these issues. The idea is to think of all these issues as a possible long-term outcome and try to connect your program to a particular outcome. The overall goal here is to show program relevance. So this slide shows other issues that residents believed extension should place a high level of effort on. Issues such as healthy relationships, chronic diseases, drug abuse, recycling, family relationships, obesity, water use, healthy foods, and agricultural production are all important issues for extension programming. So if you have a program that can relate to any of these issues, then be clear to make that connection, because this would allow you to say, according to a 2019 statewide needs assessment, residents of Utah thought extension should place high efforts on this issue. So this statement would automatically establish the relevance of your program. Now, this allows you to brainstorm new program ideas. Use the list of societal issues to create an innovative program plan. Remember, all these issues can be restated as long-term outcome for an extension program. This would always allow you to create medium and short-term outcome. So remember I spoke about a normative need being the difference between what is and what should be. The chart here shows the gap between both conditions. So the blue bars represent the desired condition. It shows what should be. And the gray bars shows what is for the current condition. The gap between the current and desired condition is shown with the red brackets. Notice a higher ranked need has a wider gap between the desired and the current condition compared to lower ranked needs. The highest priority in urban counties were affordable housing options, affordable medical clinics, and well-paying jobs. This means that urban residents thought that affordable housing options was very important, but they were dissatisfied with the state of this issue. But nevertheless, a need exists, and then there is scope for improvement and opportunities for extension. This can be in the form of an educational program or some other social intervention. Note that these interventions must aim to close the gap between what is and what should be. Take, for example, community services for mental health. There is a need to improve mental health in urban areas. So a program can aim to close the gap between current and desired states through a targeted educational program or some community-led effort. The impact of this program is reflected in a reduction in the gap between what is and what should be. If that gap narrows after your program, then you can clearly state that your program had an impact. In this regard, the program impact is already outlined, and this guides the entire evaluation plan. So I strongly suggest that you look at the various needs and ask, how does my program impact this need? This leads to the question of, how can I evaluate my program to show impact? The most important point here is that your program should directly aim to impact a known need. Take some time to connect your program to a societal issue, a community need, and then try to establish that program relevance, and then frame the potential impact of your program. In other words, your program is highly relevant if it targets any one of these needs. So this figure represents the top 10 needs in urban counties, but there are a lot more. These are just some other high priority needs in urban areas. Community shelters, healthy food, counseling services, employment, green spaces are all high priority needs in urban counties. Again, it is important that you try to connect your program to a need. This allows you to understand the potential impact of your program, and it provides a benchmark to measure program success. So take the time and look at these needs, find one that relates to your program, and try to create an impact statement that clearly addresses the need. So moving on to the needs in rural counties. you'll notice it's very similar to those of urban counties. However, there's an increased focus on job opportunities. So within the top 10 needs in rural counties are well-paying jobs, steady jobs, and employment opportunities for youth. This shows the need for programs that promote job creation and financial prosperity in rural areas. The Rural Online Initiative is a very good example that directly addresses well-paying jobs and steady jobs in rural areas. So the needs assessment shows the importance and the relevance of the ROI program. So as noted, the needs identified here presents an opportunity for extension programming. We can use these results to justify the need for our program. We can tell funders why our program is important and why it should be funded. We should clearly state that our program would impact the need because it closes the gap between the current and the desired state. Your program plan should always describe how your program would address a known need. This establishes a clear and rationale for your program to funders. There are other needs in rural areas that your program can also connect to. So again, these are very similar to those needs found in urban areas. The other needs are community shelters from domestic violence, mental health, natural disasters, and drug abuse. This points to a lack of infrastructure or physical assets in rural communities. So other needs are affordable clothing, school lunch, counseling services, senior living, and financial planning. As always, the first step is to understand the community need by looking at the list, connect your program to one or more needs, create an impact statement that addresses the need, and then establish your long-term outcomes. With that in mind, medium and short-term outcomes are easier to describe if the long-term outcome is clearly stated. So now let's move on to residents' level of interest in USU Extension Program. These are areas that fall within the scope of extension, and they may or may not currently be offered by USU Extension. The chart here shows the top 10 program areas that residents are most interested in. However, you should know that these do not have to be connected to a societal issue or a need. They just indicate what type of programs residents might be willing to take time to attend. So as you can see, residents did not show a high interest in any particular program. Those programs with moderate, tending to somewhat high interest were natural disaster preparedness, home gardening and farming, individual financial planning, and healthy eating. The others listed here are really within that moderate range of interest. So what does this mean for extension? It means that faculty must take additional steps to promote their program. This can start with promotional messages that are aimed at increasing residents' awareness of extension. While we may create impactful programs that align to a societal issue and address a known need, without participation, we cannot have any meaningful impact. While not shown here, it should be noted that there were a higher level of interest in extension programs by younger residents. So this presents an opportunity for extension to tailor its message to reach those age range. There is a need within extension to foster interest in extension programming. So how can we generate interest or public interest in extension programs? A good idea might be to target the patterns of social media use. So looking at this slide, we can see that most residents use Facebook and YouTube. Now, this is good news because USU Extension already has a strong presence on both platforms. But still, we need to look at other ways to increase interest in extension program. I think a good area of research, especially now when extension must show its relevance and value to stakeholders is to consider other platforms. The results show that Instagram and Pinterest were popular among females and younger residents. Remember, younger residents were more interested in extension programming than older residents. So it may be worthwhile to use a variety of platforms to connect with younger individuals. So results indicated most residents also used their phones to access the internet. Taken together, this shows the need for USU extension to maintain a strong online presence. So this table is just an overview of how you can use the results. The table basically outlines how to apply the findings of the statewide needs assessment to your program. Start by asking, what broad societal problem does your program address? Is it an important issue for extension? You can look at the long list of societal issues presented in this study and try to connect at least one to your program. Remember that this does not need to be the most direct connection. You can use a string of logic to connect your program. So for example, water quality can be addressed by programs focusing on landscape and fertilizer use. These programs often deal with proper methods to apply fertilizers to avoid runoffs in our water supply. So these programs basically address the risk of water contamination, which is tied to the quality of our water supply. So simply making that connection allows you to show the relevance of your program. If you'd like to further justify your program, then you can try to connect it to a known need. If you can connect your program to a need, then you have all the information from this report to frame your impact statement. Start by asking, how would my program address that need? And this will translate automatically into a long-term outcome. At this point, you can work backwards to create medium and short-term outcomes. So after, you should also think about your target audience. Who should attend your program? Once you have that in mind, use the results to understand your target audience level of interest in that type of program. This will tell you how much effort you need to spend on trying to recruit participants. In that regard, you can also use the results to figure out how to communicate with this target group. In all cases, Facebook and YouTube are popular platforms, but younger audiences might be accessible through Instagram. So now that you have the results of the needs assessment, you can use it to plan and evaluate your program. However, this is a broad needs assessment. So if you have a specialized program area, you may need to conduct a unique assessment to understand the needs of that audience. So I hope this helps you with your programming efforts. If you want more information, I'm happy to analyze the data further. Please let me know and I'll summarize the results. Also, the results and the full report are available on my website. Thanks for listening, and now I'll take your questions. So you can use the question and answer tool to ask questions, and I'll answer them as they show up. Okay, so if you would like to conduct your own needs assessment, focusing on a specialized area, I would be happy to help you design as an instrument, a questionnaire to conduct that assessment. So please feel free to reach out to me to do that. The questionnaire, it usually follows a specific format, and I'll be I'm happy to help you with that. So yes, you can reach out to me to conduct your assessment. So okay, so someone asked, did participants have a list of needs that I created, or did they write their own? So what I did, how we start these assessments is we do a comprehensive literature review. This review usually covers most of the societal issues, and we look at different regions. So what I did was pull out all those needs from different states, from different extension services, and I put it in a list. So all the needs were pre-defined. It was a list of 30 different items. So I created that list and asked participants to state the level of the perceived importance of this item and how satisfied they are with the state of this item. So someone asked, where should we start with crafting an impact statement? Are there specific formats? Yes, there are specific formats for needs assessment. I'll have to post those on my website, but there are templates that we use to plug in specific words to get an impact statement. But keep in mind, an impact statement basically states how your program is going to address a need. So for example, if we're going to tackle rural unemployment, the impact would be a decrease in rural unemployment. And that would be the long-term outcome of the program. At that point, we work backwards with medium-term and short-term outcomes. So all the charts I presented in this presentation were those top 10 items. The report itself has the full list of items for needs and priority issues. So talking about those societal issues with high priority, only the top 10 was stated, but there are 25 other items that were within the high and moderate range. So that the full report would be available on my website. So someone asked, have you shared the lit review for this study? And what are some scholarly articles on extension you should read? So most extension services conduct needs assessment, but they don't do statewide needs assessment. What I did in the lit review is look at those big universities, what instruments they used, and then try to create my own instrument. This the instrument that I use, the questionnaire I use, would be tailored to other states in the Western region. So the Western region evaluation network is already asked for a version of my questionnaire so that they can use it in their states to conduct their needs assessment. But most of the items, most of the issues, most of the needs are taken from other needs assessment in the eastern region and the northern region. So someone asked, and I would answer this question, but someone asked, what was your epistemology for this needs assessment? The epistemology from this needs assessment is rooted in constructivism. I won't go into that further. So are there any more questions? I'll wait 1 minute. Okay. If you're thinking about doing a needs assessment, it does not have to be online. You can create your own assessment and do individual one-on-one interviews with your target audience. It all depends on the size of the population. So if you're only if the point of the needs assessment is to understand the problems facing agricultural producers, and in your county, you can reach out to 20 producers, then I recommend you print out a questionnaire and you go to each producer individually and basically do an interview. The reason why I did this online is because this was a statewide needs assessment. But for your specialized target audience, I would recommend a pen and paper, and this would also give you the opportunity to talk to your target audience, which is always a very good thing in trying to understand the problem so that you can create those relevant extension programs. So, and someone asked, where can I find existing needs assessment instruments? Well, I'll make mine available, although it's very long. And if you go on the websites of different universities, so I found instruments at Tennessee State, University of Tennessee, Wisconsin-Madison, University of Florida, North Carolina's State Universities always good resources. So you go directly to those extension websites. As I said, NC State, University of Tennessee, Wisconsin-Madison, University of Florida, and you'll find existing instruments. I think the University of Georgia also has one. Any more questions? Okay. If there are, that seems to be all the questions for now. So if you can think of anything else, please do not hesitate to contact me. Thanks for participating in this webinar, and I hope you can join me in my next webinar next month. Thank you and have a good day.